There comes a point in the life of a painting when you have to say it's done, it's finished, and you have to walk away. Or not, actually. I have paintings that I've been working on what seems to be forever. But what I want to talk to you in this video is about actually physically finishing rather than emotionally finishing, which is a whole different subject matter. This is an acrylic painting, and I did this painting a while ago, but I kept it because for me, I always keep what I call breakthrough paintings. There's always a few paintings that you think, something actually happened there, and whilst I could take a digital photograph of it and let it go out into the world, there's something about having it in my studio to remind me what I did and what made it a breakthrough painting that is really valuable, actually. So I tend to hang on to my breakthrough paintings. I probably hang on to about 3 a year or 4 a year. This dates back a good couple of years now, and I've just noticed as I was planning this that as it's a breakthrough painting, I never actually finished it in terms of I didn't give it a finish, okay, because I knew I wasn't going to sell it, I knew I was going to hang on to it. I just put it on the wall. And what I've got in this is a mixture of acrylic paint and collage, and hopefully you can see that that means that some bits are shiny because the acrylic paint, certainly down here, and some bits are very dull because of the collage. Okay, if you have an image like this, before you go into any final finish or varnish, you need to unify that absorbency, otherwise your final finish will be patchy, okay, which isn't really what we want. So the first thing I need to do to this is give it what's called an isolation coat. It's actually a really useful coat to have in between layers of acrylic paint, particularly if you're using different absorbencies. Okay, because it means you can go back to your isolation coat and not necessarily go right back further. It's just good practice as you're building an acrylic painting. Just every now and again, put an isolation coat in, particularly if you use lots of mark making tools, for example. You can get recipes for isolation coats. It's mostly soft gel mixed with a bit of water, but I tend to just use gloss medium. Okay, I get it in big tubs. So I dispense it into bottles, but this is golden gloss medium. This is going to make it super shiny, but that doesn't matter because actually only the final layer is what will determine its sheen. Okay, so even though I know I don't want this to be a shiny painting with a shiny varnish or a shiny finish, it doesn't really matter at this stage, as long as I wouldn't use matte medium at this stage, because matte medium can be a bit foggy, and if you use lots of layers of matte medium, it's not 100% transparent, so you could end up with foggy. So this is just gloss medium, making sure obviously your surface is clean. So I've laid down some gloss medium. I squirted too much on. I've taken half of it off actually, so you don't have to put as much down as I just did. But I've laid down a layer of gloss medium, which brings me to my point, another point, that gloss medium and acrylic paint are not final finishes. If ever you've done that process where you put a little bit of paint on a rag, for example, and push it in and push it around an acrylic painting, particularly to kick down the whites, and then wiped it off, it stains. Okay, so acrylic paint will stain, even though it's plastic, even though it's dry, it will stain. So it isn't a final finish, it is still slightly absorbent forever. So what we need to do once this has dried off is give it a final finish. Okay, and we have choices in that, but whatever we use, it needs to dry non-absorbent. So this is fully dry. I left it a couple of hours, and now I'm going to varnish this one just to show you about varnishing. And again, it's much thinner than any other product, and I'm just going to very gently brush it out. Don't be tempted to push it around too much, you will get air bubbles. And I'll do 2 coats of this before it's deciding it's done. And it's the final layer that I will use a matted down varnish, because I don't like a shine. or go in with cold wax medium, which is perfectly possible as a finish on a painting or a watercolour. It's quite shiny. It's a gloss varnish, but at least I know now that that's all fully secure, all sealed in, all absorbance is done. And if I want to kick back the gloss, all I need to do is give it a little bit of a wipe over and then varnish it. Okay, there's a kind of like, you can't go backwards. This has got a bit of shine though, this has been varnished, and so I'm just going to rub it gently, very gently, just to take the shine off with a piece of wire wool. I could have used sandpaper, that would be fine, but I find with the wire wool I can get my fingers in and get into areas and I can see what's going on. Whereas the sandpaper tends to just skim over the surface. What I'm doing with this, I'm just using it to take the sheen off that varnish layer. Just kicking it back, dulling it down so that the cold wax medium has something to hang on to. Wire wool can leave little bits of wire wool about, so do make sure you give it a final dust before you go in with your cold wax medium. Okay, you can see them all down here, little shavings, so get rid of those for sure. There we are, nice clean surface, a varnished surface. This time I'm only going to use one layer, probably. Okay, I'm just going to go in with the last of my softened cold wax medium. So this is one that was varnished, and then I put wax on. Okay, it's dried off nicely. It just needs buffing up. To bring back the sheen. On larger pieces, you know, if I'm going up to 1 metre or plus, I have a power polisher. It just helps my wrists and my shoulders. That's giving a really nice finish. There's still enough of a shine to pick up the textures, but it doesn't feel plasticky. This is an acrylic painting, and I find that by coating it with wax like this, people naturally presume it's an oil painting because it takes the plasticky look off the acrylic. So this is a sister one of the series, just to show maybe the difference in shine. Okay, that's quite shiny. That hasn't been waxed, that's just been varnished. This one has been waxed. It's more of a patina. It looks more leathery. So to recap, you have choices with your acrylic painting. So you decide whether or not you want it shiny and whether or not you matte. If you want it shiny, then that's quite straightforward. You're going to head for a gloss varnish after an isolation coat. If you're wanting it matte, you have two choices. You can either go down a matte varnish route or a satin varnish route, or you can finish it with cold wax medium and buff it up What you need to make sure though is whatever you do, mark the back of your painting with whatever you have given it a coat with, because if you've given it a coat with wax, then you cannot then go back in with any water-based media. Okay, it will just fall off. So just as an aid memoir, I write a W on the back of any piece that has a wax finish. So what do you do if you want to revisit a painting? How do you approach that? If it's a golden varnish, for example, you can either remove it with hydrogen peroxide. Certainly I'd recommend you have an isolation layer, so you can go back to that isolation layer by removing the varnish. You can sand the varnish to get some kind of tooth with wire wool or sandpaper, or you can add a coat of Liquitex clear gesso that is going to give you a toothy surface, a receptive surface for any subsequent paint that you might add to that. If you finished it with cold wax medium, yes, you can remove the cold wax medium down to your acrylic isolation layer with odorless mineral spirits. It's quite a chore and you need to make sure you've got it all off. But on the whole, with cold wax medium, you can pretty much just go straight back in. I would make, if it's very, very hard, maybe give it a little bit of solvent to make that surface up, but you can go back in with oil and cold wax medium, not anything acrylic.